So step one, the word that kind of gets us to this step is the word unmanageability. There's another word that I want to talk about in a minute, but on the surface, this is an activity that is going to cause us to have to deal with unmanageability in our lives. Step one says this, as Steve read it. We admitted, so just that word right there, admitted, says that we're not going to like this, amen? Like normally it doesn't go like, I was going to go to my favorite Mexican restaurant and I went there and I admitted that it was good. Like normally if I'm going to go to a place and I don't think it's going to be very good and someone goes, I told you this place was good, then I have to admit to them, right, that, okay, it was really pretty good. But when I admit things, it means I do what I'm going to do, in a lot of cases anyway, regrettably, right? Like I'm going to do it, I'm going to tell you the truth, but I'm not going to like it, and I'm going to have to sort of like deal with that admission. We admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, and in the case of a way we understand compulsion, drugs, losses, pain, relationships, sex addiction, gambling, food disorders, all of that and more than that our lives had become unmanageable. And the biblical reference that Steve read is Romans 7. I see that there's another, and this is where we're talking about strongholds. There's another power within me that is at war with my mind. This power makes me a slave to the brokenness that is still within me. And this step, and really the first three steps, show us that no matter what else we understand, and it's all really important to understand the nature of this disease, the physicality of this disease, the way this disease works on brain chemistry, and we can talk about all of that and help you to understand more about that than maybe you even want to know, but it's so important to understand that this disease of compulsion, for all of us, whether we're on the family side of this, the friend side of this, or it's our own compulsion, whether it's our codependency or we're here to try to help somebody else with what's going on with them, this is in the end and in the beginning a spiritual disease, amen? This is going to have something to do with how you're doing with God, what your relationship with God is like, how you understand yourself to be in a relationship or not in a relationship with God, anger that you currently are carrying around about God, frustration that you're carrying around about God, a sense of being on the run from God. It's going to have something to do with what is called your spiritual life. Does this, so the way we understand this, compulsion is a spiritual disease that has physical, mental, and emotional outcomes, or investments is another way to talk about that. But the core of what recovery is all about is, how do I satisfy the spiritual breach or the spiritual brokenness that is going on within me? How do I deal with, another way to put this, how do I deal with my broken heart? And how does my broken heart relate to my broken relationship or the relationship that I'm struggling with God? So in this first step, we're being challenged to accept and admit and come to terms with this lovely term of powerlessness. So tonight, before I came here, I go over to Texas Roadhouse, and I'm going to have their early bird special. And I'm going to have this little steak, and then I'm going to have a baked potato and a salad. And everything was going just fine. But I ate this one piece of steak, and it seemed like it was a little bit of a challenge to swallow. And then my second to last piece of steak that is sitting there, I realized that it's like stuck. And, I tried to swallow 3 or 4 times, no luck. Now I'm getting a little bit concerned. I'm looking around, trying to drink some tea. It comes right back. so that's worthless. And I'm like flagging down these people across the deal from me, the walkway from me, like, hey, I'm in trouble. And she's like looking at me like, do you need help? And I'm like, yeah. So her husband gets up from the table, comes over, and I mean, he literally does the Heimlich, and it works. And he looked at me and I looked at him and he goes, that just scared the hell out of me. I'm like, well, the good news for you is it scared the hell out of me. So we're even. I'm like, thank you very much. I'm not really sure. He said, I've never had to do that. I'm like, that's never happened to me either. But in that point right there, like that is exactly what powerlessness looks like. Amen. I cannot do for myself what I actually need God to do for me. I don't know how that guy knew the Heimlich deal. I have no clue. He said he's never done it. I don't know how he knew to do that. I don't know how I got their attention. I don't know any of that. But I could not, at that moment, no matter what I would have done right then, I could not have done for myself. It was becoming clearly obvious. I could not do something for myself that I needed God through that guy, right, to do for me. And see, there isn't one piece of that as a human being, any of us really likes. We're not attracted to the idea of powerlessness. We see Jesus show us an unbelievable, long, painful, difficult, deep suffering example of powerlessness by his choice to be nailed on a cross to die for us. And yet we still somehow want to believe that we're above this, or we're beyond this, or we're better than, and we should be able to be the ones to control whatever it is that's happening to us, and we should be the ones to fix it, and we should be the ones to figure it out. We should be the ones. It's like, why would you go to an NA meeting or an AA meeting or an Al-Anon meeting when you could clear your airway yourself? Like the Heimlich, right? Why would you do it? Why not try to do it by yourself? But the very first place, the jumping off point of recovery, takes us to this dilemma of powerlessness. And here's the deal. Until we begin to really understand and accept and live out of our powerlessness, there ain't going to be any recovery. There isn't going to be any sobriety. There isn't going to really be any peace. And there isn't really going to be any freedom. Amen? There's not going to be that. And we can play it out all we want to, and we can go through all 12 of these steps, but you know what? If we're not willing to wrestle with this one, whatever else we do, we're going through the motions. Step 2 depends on step 1. Step 3 depends on step 2. Step 4 depends on step 3. That's the way this works. And they all depend on step 1. Do I want to be a free woman? Do I want to be a free man? Do I want to receive the abundant life that Jesus is offering to me over and over again? Or do I want to be a slave to the brokenness that's within me? So I really do believe that coming to terms with powerlessness, it's a process. It's a process. I know for me, I lived with my first wife's alcoholism for a long, long time. And never once, if I'm honest with myself, never once did I feel like powerlessness. I always thought there must have been some other way to get at it, some other way to fix it, some other way to manage it, some other way to make it right, some other way, say some other right thing for her to be free and to be healthy. Until this one time when she had been through a series of really difficult days with drinking, and it was just not possible for her to keep living with our kids. And so she decided that she would go live with somebody in the program. And so she did that. And when she went to this woman's house who had 25 years or more sober, at least, and she was there 2 days, and I get a phone call from the lady who says, you know, your wife, the thing is, when I came home from wherever I was, she was completely blacked out on the floor, and I was worried for her, and so I put her in an ambulance, and she's heading to Hilton Head Hospital right now. And you can meet her there or you cannot meet her there, whatever you want to do. Well, of course, I met her there. Ambulance rolls in. They take her into an emergency room. They give her an IV. She starts to become a little bit more alert. They I don't know if they still do it this way or not, but back in the day, they told me they were going to give her a charcoal regimen to try to help her deal with her, the amount of alcohol that was in her bloodstream. So an hour and a half later, I waited in that room all that time. An hour and a half later, during that whole time, I was just kind of sitting there waiting. But when they brought her back in the room, for the very first time, after years of everybody in our family struggling mightily with this disease, but for sure, Mark Beebe having no intention of accepting my powerlessness, I end up looking at a cinder block wall in that hospital room, in that ER. And when I'm staring at that wall, it was the oddest thing. It was almost like, well, I'm convinced now it was like God basically started saying to me, Mark, tonight's going to be the night that you're going to have to make a choice. And the choice that you're going to have to make is, you're going to have to decide if, I need you to imagine yourself with Barb and the girls all being in a car. And I want you to imagine this car going 70 miles an hour. And I want you to imagine that car inevitably, it was going to hit that cinder block wall. I want you to put your hand on the cinder block wall and imagine that that's what it's going to hit. And I want you to realize that when you hit that wall, whoever is in that car isn't going to come out of it. And the choice for you is, are you going to be in there with the girls? Are you going to be in there and not have the girls? Are you going to get out of the car with the girls? Because Barb's not coming out of that. She's not going to come out of that car, at least not because of you. And you got to make a decision for you, and you got to make a decision for the girls. What are you going to do? And I got to tell you, during all that time, and it was a long time, during all that time, I never once, not one time, had successfully come to terms with my powerlessness over this disease. Like, I had come to terms with my frustration. I had come to terms with anxiety about what was going to happen to all of us. I had a tremendous anxiety about what was going to happen to her. But never one time had I come to terms with my powerlessness until then. Until right then. And I got to tell you, it was whatever humbling is, it was more than that. And whatever a reckoning is, it was more than that. And whatever an emptiness is inside of you, it was the deepest emptiness I think I've ever felt. And that's what powerlessness feels like right? It's like we can be very good. You can go to your first AA or NA or Al-Anon meeting, and everybody can be reading this step, and you can chime right in and go, I'm powerless over whatever it is that I've carried in here, and my life is unmanageable. And man, since everybody else in the room can say it, what the heck? Why not? You too. It's one thing to get those words out of your mouth. It's something completely different for those words to begin to take hold of your heart. Because when you do that, when you get to that place of powerlessness, maybe whether it's over a relationship, maybe it's over somebody in your life that you care about, it could be a million things, but once you get to that place of powerlessness, one of the first things that's going to happen is you're going to acknowledge the truth of the despair that is going on around you. And then likely after that, there's going to be a corrective. And the corrective is going to be that you're going to assess whether or not maybe that was just you having a bad day, and you're going to see if you can figure out some way to remanage attaining control. You're going to chalk it off, that first experience with this. You're going to try to figure out some way to go, well, maybe it's really not that bad. I mean, maybe this despair was just temporary. And you're going to try to figure it out some way to be in charge again or to reclaim your self-centeredness. And here's our first spiritual dilemma. Are we going to continue to live, whether it's codependency or alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever, are we going to continue to live as self-centered, dying individuals, or are we going to allow Jesus to set us free from our self-centeredness, to actually accept from our hearts our powerlessness, so that then he can begin to go to work on our hearts? Well, how do you expedite? How do you advantage powerlessness? Well, here's 4 or 5 things you can really do. Number 1, regardless of what you're in the middle of right now tonight, it really doesn't matter. So don't sit there and blow me off because I'm talking about going to this kind of a meeting, because they would benefit everybody in this room. But number 1, if you want to expedite your powerlessness, go to an open speaker meeting, an open AA speaker meeting. You can look it up on AA Knoxville. Go to an open AA speaker meeting for one purpose only. Not to learn how to get tips on how to manage somebody else, but go so that you can listen for the truth that is being shared in that room about your own life. Go to be able to listen to the truth about your own life. Go to a speaker meeting. Number 2, go to a lot of them. Number 2, ask people that you love and ask people that love you if your emotions, your behavior, or what about you, if anything, has changed. And if they're not trying to hold you like basically like a China doll, they'll probably tell you. Number 3, when it comes to their rejection, which is what we're going to be in the middle of, when it comes to their rejection of your powerlessness, examine your fears, examine your defenses, and examine your pride. Pride is one of the strongholds that we dealt with in that previous series. Examine your fears, examine your defenses, and examine your pride. Number 4, examine justification and rationalization. It'll get better. It's not that bad. if I take any kind of an action, it's going to cause even more problems because there are going to be economic issues or this issue or that issue, or I'm going to make somebody in the family mad, or I don't know what it is, but examine your justification for why you still believe you have control and power over this. Maybe not the events, but over the overall experience. Maybe you couldn't control last weekend, but you overall believe you can still control that relationship somehow. Examine your justifications and examine your rationalizations. How you're trying to make sense of stuff that is so much bigger than you are. Number 5, ask yourself this question. Am I gaining more? Or am I losing more in my life right now? Am I gaining more or am I losing more in my life right now? Because to answer that question, you're going to get down to that point of going, man, I'm working my butt off to control this. And I keep losing things. I keep losing myself. I don't know if any of you guys have ever woken up and just felt like the person you're looking at in the morning, you really aren't sure you actually know that person anymore. Anybody ever felt like that? You're not convinced that you actually know the person you're staring at in the mirror anymore. Are you gaining more or are you losing more in your life? Number 6. Number 7, I'm sorry. Do I lack an understanding of my limits? Can I actually say out loud, I'm not capable of doing that? I remember, I don't know about your moms and stuff, but like for example, for yours truly, my mom, for some reason, I think when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask her this question. Because my way of looking at it now, my perception of this now is that my mom did this to torture us. I used to think it was very loving. And more, I'm not really so sure. But my mom would save all of our, if you want to call it this, artwork. Right, and I remember I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade, and of nobody in my family, none of my parents would ever smoked or anything. None of my grandparents, my grandfather smoked a pipe, but for some reason I decided that I would make an ashtray. This ashtray, in terms of its shape and form, had to be one of the ugliest ashtrays ever produced in the United States. It was awful. And worse than that, and it's sort of like it probably takes me this probably the starter set of why I feel this way now, but the worst part of it now when I think back about the colors, because I can imagine this thing, the colors, if you know me, you're going to know why this is important. The colors were absolutely University of South Carolina Gamecock colors. And that was before I knew anything about Clemson or anything like that, but still in all, there it is. And my mom would sit there and she would defend that ashtray to people that would come in our house. I was well aware of my limits, that I was never going to be a world class or even a B+ art student, like I wasn't going to be. I got a D something, a D whatever, lower than a D. It wasn't an F, but it was a lower D in a typing class. I was well aware in high school I was never going to be a very good typist. I had other people type my papers all the way through college. I was the first guy around to buy one of those Radio Shack TRS-80, if you remember those things, computers that were monsters. Only because, the manual for Word Perfect was like about And I read that thing just so I could learn to type my own stuff. Like, I know those limits, but when it came to my own spiritual disease, like I could not accept the limitations of my powerlessness. And as long as I lack an understanding of that limitation of my life, I'm going to stay sick, and my disease is going to continue to take deeper hold, and it's going to continue to consume more and more of me, and eventually take everything from me. Do I realize that my lack of limits is my death sentence? Do I realize that the opposite of understanding my powerlessness is my death sentence? You know, the people talk to other people about this program, and they say, there are very few basics about this program, right? You got to have a healthy relationship. You need someone you can trust that'll speak truth to you, that you can speak truth to. You got to have a sponsor. You got to go to meetings to learn how to think in the opposite direction of how you're thinking now. And you got to go for a long time. How long you got to go? Until you want to, and then it won't be a problem. 3, you got to read literature that is going to help you to think and support thinking in the opposites. And when we don't believe that we have a limitation, and we don't believe that we have powerlessness, if 7,500 people suggested the fact that you needed a sponsor, you, with your sense of not having any limits, would go, I know, but I'm different. If everybody in America stood here in a line, if there were 20,000 people that are sober standing in a room right here, and they all said to you, you got to go to meetings, until you accept your powerlessness, it won't be enough. You will smugly continue to die. That is what's going to happen. 100,000 people can say, you really need to read this book. You really need to read the big book. Wouldn't matter. Because as long as you have no limitations, you're never going to get past this step. Do I realize that my lack of limitation is actually my death sentence? The word that comes to mind with step 1 is it's a yes or no. It really isn't a middle ground. It's a yes or no. Are you willing? Am I willing to do anything I have to do in order to be free and sober? Anything. Anything is anything. For several years, the answer for me was no. I would be willing to do some things, but there's no way I was willing to do anything. Here's the opposite of anything. Rarely, this comes out of the big book, rarely have you seen a person fail who has thoroughly done anything to follow this path. Those who do not recover, people who do not get sober, are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program, usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves about limits. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. But many of them do recover if they have the capacity to just be honest. Or another way of putting that, to just accept powerlessness. That quote is out of the AA Big Book. I want to read Romans 7 again. I see there is this other power in me that is at war with my mind. This power makes me a slave to the brokenness that is still within me. it really doesn't matter tonight what I know about this disease, what I know about recovery, what I know about the road to recovery, what I know about the freedom of this. As long as you're willing to go through tonight and tomorrow night and the next night as a slave to this power greater than you that is actually in the middle of destroying you day by day, piece by piece, there won't be any change for freedom. But if you're ready tonight to have some real freedom in your life, and you're ready tonight to come to terms with the very difficult decision that you're powerless, we're going to offer up some white chips tonight. It would be your first second of accepting your powerlessness and the gift of freedom that Jesus is offering right here and right now. In his sweet name, amen.